What is up, AP people? You are asking yourself today, what do I need to know about the Revolutionary War for my AP exam? I am here to help you, so let's get going. All right, let's talk about some events before the war itself. Now, I'm going to quickly list some things that you should be familiar with that lead up to the war. The first one that starts in 1763 is the end of salutary neglect, or the idea that Britain now starts to take a very hands-on approach in dealing with the colonies. An example of salutary neglect ending are these taxes, these different acts that are passed, including the Sugar Stamp, Townsend, and Tea Acts. Also, the Coercive Acts, which was passed in response to the Boston Tea Party, which really punished Boston, and representation, or a lack thereof of representation, that the colonists felt they had. And Britain answered with virtual representation, but the colonists were like, you know what, that's really not good enough for us. If you want more info on this, check out my very first video ever recorded, APUSH review key acts leading to the American Revolution, and see how far I've come. And also there's a little surprise about the Cincinnati Reds in there too. Okay, let's talk about three key writings associated with the war that you should know very well. And the first one is the Olive Branch Petition from 1775. If you've seen Olive Branch, that's like the universal symbol of peace. Now, this is adopted by the Second Continental Congress after the battles of Lexington and Concord and Bunker or Breed's Hill. So there are three skirmishes between the colonists and the British. And the colonists say, you know what, King, we're loyal to you. Let's just stop this fighting, redress our grievances. That's a phrase you should be familiar with, which basically means fix our problems, fix our complaints. Let's go back to the days of salutary neglect. The colonists hoped to avoid a full-scale war, but KG3, King George III, wanted nothing to do with it. He rejected it, and then shortly after, he hires a group of mercenary soldiers called Hessians. They are from Germany, and they are known as brutal soldiers. And the colonists do not like the hiring of the Hessian soldiers whatsoever. They see this more as a family skirmish. Why are you bringing in these brutal soldiers? In 1776, early 1776, we have a book called Common Sense, written by this guy, T. Paine or Thomas Paine. And in his book, he stated it was common sense for America to break away from England. He said, nowhere in the entire universe does a smaller body control a larger, more heavenly body. So he's saying to America, break away. The king is a bad dude. And he appealed to many Americans on the fence. So these Americans who weren't sure if they should break away or not, that was his target audience. Then, of course, we all know the Declaration of Independence, which this guy gets credit for writing, Thomas Jefferson, although certainly John Adams and Ben Franklin had a part in it as well. There are multiple parts of the Declaration, including the idea of what a government should be and a list of all the things that KG3 did wrong. Okay, two groups you need to be familiar with during the war. We have patriots and loyalists, and these are Americans at the time, or people living in America. I keep saying that, but they're still colonists. I'm getting ahead of myself. Patriots are those that favored independence, and usually they fought for independence or somehow supported it. On the other side, we have loyalists. These are Americans or colonists that stayed loyal to England, and they made up roughly 20% of the population. And during the war, many of them were harassed. They had their property confiscated, and many of them ended up leaving the country after the war as well. And they fled to places like England or Canada. Okay, some key battles during the war. There's three of them that you should be familiar with. And the first one I talked briefly about is the Battle of Bunker Hill, which is incorrectly called. It should really have been called Breed's Hill, and this happens in June of 1775. Now, the Americans end up losing this battle, but there were heavy British casualties. It was actually the worst day of the entire war for the British. You'll notice here, I should mention this earlier, but in 1775 we have battles going on, even though the Americans have not yet declared independence. Their battles before independence was declared. And this led to a huge increase in morale and the belief in the American or the colonist military capabilities. Arguably, or I will argue, the most important battle of the war for AP, as far as AP is concerned, is the Battle of Saratoga. And this happens on October 17th, 1777. The Americans, led by Gates, defeat the British, who is led by General Burgoyne. And this battle results in French aid and an alliance with this guy, Louis XVI. So after this battle, after the Americans win, the French realized, okay, maybe this is the real deal, these Americans fighting for independence. So they the French start to aid America in their cause, and really they play a huge role in helping the Americans win. The Battle of Yorktown, 4 years to the day after Saratoga, not a good day in British history during the Revolutionary War, October 17th. General Cornwallis surrenders to General Washington. This is the last major battle of the war. Okay, let's talk about some diplomacy during the war you should be familiar with. We have Benjamin Franklin, and he helped obtain French aid, foreign aid, especially with the French. And you see Ben here on the right, and he is meeting with King Louis XVI. He played an instrumental part in getting foreign aid. We have Marquis de Lafayette. He is from France. He worked at Washington's side, was a very good military person, and he also helped with French aid. And this guy was so popular in the 1820s, 50 years after the Revolutionary War ended, he did like a farewell tour in America. Many cities just had huge parades for this guy. Very, very popular person. And in February 1788, France officially recognizes U.S. independence, which is huge because other European countries now come to the aid of the United States in the war, particularly Spain and the Netherlands. So this really helped the U.S. become more successful. Now, the Treaty of Paris, 1783, this formally or officially ends the war. A couple parts of the treaty that you should be familiar with. One, Britain recognized U.S. independence. Two, the Americans promised that loyalists would not be persecuted. Americans could fish in Newfoundland. Now, I know you're probably thinking to yourself, what, fishing rights, really? That's important? It is. I've seen some AP questions, so don't dismiss the fishing rights. U.S. gains land east of the Mississippi River, so all this land here in red is now belongs to the United States. So think about, if I can draw this little arrow here, if you follow my arrow, this is kind of where the Appalachian Mountains were. So all this land west now, if you think back to the proclamation line of 1763, the Americans gain all that land up to the Mississippi River, and Spain is going to be over here. And finally, the British, there were to be no obstacles for British merchants that were collecting their debts. Okay, let's talk about women in the war. Women's roles increased during the war while husbands and fathers fought. Many women stayed and worked at military camps to help out. They did things like cooking, caretaking, helping with laundry, doing a lot of things that were very necessary to the success of the war. You did have stories of some women even disguising themselves as men to fight. After the revolution, we'll figure out what was the impact on women. Well, in 1776, Abigail Adams writes her husband, the future second president of the United States, to remember the ladies. And this is not successful. She's basically telling John, when they're creating this new government, don't forget to help out women here. And John's like, oops, sorry. After the revolution, married women could still not do the following: own property, get a divorce, vote. And they couldn't vote whether they were married or not. And then this idea develops of Republican motherhood. And it started here. It's very important. This idea will be around for a very long time. And it's the idea that women should raise virtuous children that are good citizens. So this really reinforces this idea that women should just kind of stay home and raise children. So if you think about the Revolutionary War, this idea of fighting for freedom, all men are created equal, women are really kind of left out of the benefits that many people received. Let's talk about African Americans in the war. During the war, you had roughly 5,000 African Americans that fought on the American side. You also had some slaves that escaped, and they fought on the British behalf, or they simply fled to Canada or Florida or different areas. And the reason why slaves were fighting on behalf of the British was that the British promised to slaves, if you fight on our behalf, we will free you after the war. And this led to a lot of resentment from Southern farmers and plantation owners, and actually helped increase people in the South to fight against the British. The impact of the Revolution on African Americans: this idea that all men are created equal does not apply. Just like women, you'll see that African Americans do not really gain anything after the Revolutionary War. However, slavery is quickly abolished in most of the North, and in particular, we have the Northwest Ordinance of 1787, which is this old Northwest territory here. Slavery is banned there. That's one of the few positives of the Articles of Confederation. So be familiar with the Northwest Ordinance. However, slavery is protected in the Constitution. There's a very tough Fugitive Slave Act. And also the Constitution calls for 3 out of 5 slaves to be counted towards representation. So there is no freedom for slaves. Slavery does not end. Native Americans in the world, let's talk about the Iroquois Confederacy. They were divided over who to support. And here's a flag of the Iroquois Confederacy. Roughly half the tribes wanted to support the British, including this guy, Joseph Brant. And the other half either supported the Americans or they wanted to stay out. Now, challenges for Native Americans after the war. England no longer prevented that expansion that I talked about earlier across the Appalachian Mountains. So now Americans are moving west of the Appalachian Mountains, and many Americans resented the natives that fought alongside the British. Just to go back to Americans moving west across the Appalachian Mountains, you're going to start to see lots of conflict, and this will continue for many years, including the War of 1812 and many, many years later. Americans will continue to expand and encroach on Native American land. Okay, so two past essay topics have appeared on the AP exams. One is analyze the political, diplomatic, and military reasons for the United States victory in the Revolutionary War. Confine your answer to the period 1775 to 1783. So you could talk all the way from the battles of Lexington and Concord up to and including the Treaty of Paris, and that is from 2010. And another one is analyze the impact of the American Revolution on both slavery and the status of women in the period from 1775 to 1800, and that is from 2004. Hopefully, after watching this video, you will be able to come up with some pretty good essay responses for those two essays. Okay, that's it for this video. Thanks for watching. I hope I clarified a lot of stuff for the Revolutionary War for you. Take a moment to subscribe. If you have any questions, comments, clarifications, please feel free to throw them in the comments and I will happily answer them. Thank you very much for watching and have a good day, guys.